City leaders released their 2016-2018 budget plan. City Council approved that plan, but it had some shortfalls. About $4.4 million for the shortfall. We sat down with Haydon, and he talked about how this budget is a status quo budget. We asked what that means and identified what the shortfalls are in this plan. So last week, the City Council approved the 2016-2018 budget. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that process and maybe define why it's a 2-year budget.
Well, we try to deal with matters as efficiently as possible. And we were one of the first cities on the Central Coast that did a biannual budget, i.e. 2 one-year budgets covering 2 fiscal years. The idea on that is we project out 24 months, but then it also gives us an ability to reassess where we are at the end of the one fiscal year prior to the next fiscal year. At that point in time, we call it the mid-cycle budget adjustment. And so at that point, we're only having to really tweak the budget, and we don't have a lot of labor associated with putting together a document like this. I mean, we're talking a document that's over 250 pages. Earlier in my career, I worked for a lot of governments that they would do this as a proposed budget, and then once the proposed budget was adopted, they'd come back and they'd pretty much revise the whole thing and then slap a approved budget on it.
Right.
And then from my perspective, it's a duplication of effort because it really doesn't change that much. And if it does change, you can capture what those changes are in the minutes of the council meeting or in the direction that the city council brings you at the following meeting.
Right.
So what we do is we do 2 one-year budgets, and it takes probably around 6 months to put this together. It starts in January, in which we send information to all the departments as to where they are in the fiscal year, what their budget is, what their anticipated expenditures are at mid-year, and then asking them to project what they're going to be at the year end. Also asking departments where they project their revenues to be in the next fiscal year. Once we get the revenues down, then we know the funding source that we have to finance the operational expenses. On a dual track, our finance department is going forward and they're building in what the anticipated expenditures are. And when I say that, what we do is we basically do incremental budgeting. We use last fiscal year as the base because we want to maintain existing services. And then we incrementally increase it based off of cost of living adjustments, negotiated salary increases that the city council has also authorized us to provide our bargaining groups, anticipated PERS increases, which is pension increases, and then any other type of operational increases that we can anticipate. For example, if we have a multi-year contract with the county of Santa Barbara for animal control services, we know what that increase is going to be. If we have other contracts with outside vendors to perform maintenance functions for us, and it goes up based off of the CPI each year, we know what it is this year, we can factor in what that increase is going to be the next year. That gives us the baseline for what our expenditures are. And then we reassess it to say, do we have revenues that can maintain our operational expenses?
So let's talk numbers. What's the total budget?
Total budget in the general fund is approximately $167 million.
And is that for the 2-year process? 2-year?
That's only for the first year.
Okay.
For the first year. The entire appropriations for all of our operating funds are closer to $158 million. And when I say operating funds, I'm saying primarily the general fund, our utility funds, which are water, sewer, and wastewater, and refuse collection and landfill. And then transit funds, special revenue funds such as gas tax funds, capital funds, park development funds, those special revenue type of funds. And then our entire budget is closer to $198 million. And that also includes capital funds, internal service funds, insurance funds, liability funds, workers' comp funds, those things that we don't look at as really operational, but they have a special purpose.
Right, right. So this year, in your budget message, you called this budget a status quo budget.
Correct.
So that means what?
Primarily when I say status quo, what I'm referring to is that the existing level of services that we're providing this fiscal year, we will maintain next fiscal year. We're not increasing the level of service, we're just maintaining the level of service.
So residents shouldn't expect a cut in services?
No, and that's big. I mean, for us, that's big, because we've come off of the recession that hit us in 2007. Our revenues really were reduced from 2007 until last fiscal year,
Right.
until we basically have gotten back up to where we were in pre-recessionary levels. And so that's good from a revenue side. The problem is our expenditures didn't take as much of a dip as our revenues. Actually, they were escalating each year.
Right.
And so that's why it's been difficult to balance our budget over the last several years.
And this year was difficult because you had a shortfall this year.
Correct.
And what's that amount to?
In the general fund, and right now my primary discussion is going to be dealing with the general fund,
Sure.
because we're dealing primarily with police, fire, recreation and parks, those essential city services that people come to expect.
Sure.
We're looking at around $4.4 million going into next fiscal year right now.
And where was that? What increased or what decreased to get there? Is that is an easy answer?
I'll do the 30,000 elevation view on that one. As I mentioned, the recession really took a bite out of our ongoing revenues. Property taxes were down, sales taxes were down, construction permits were down across the board. And so when you had a dip like this, it takes a long time to come out of the recession. Unfortunately, the stock market plunged at the same time.
Right.
With the stock market plunged, so did our pension funds. CalPERS, the largest retirement fund in the world, they lost a third of their investment portfolio.
Right.
And so the way that they deal with their investments to finance retired pension annuitants is primarily three ways. It comes from CalPERS investments, which makes up about 3/4 or 2/3 of their investment portfolio. 20% comes from employers, such as the city of Santa Maria, that provides them money. And then 10% comes from the employees themselves that invest into the system.
Right.
So when you have a system that's set up that 2/3 of it loses a third of its revenue, they have to build it up some manner.
Right.
And housing didn't come back as quickly as it did, the stock market didn't come back as quickly as it did. So what they're doing is they're shifting a lot of the responsibilities onto employers, whether it's cities, counties, special districts, airport districts, cemetery districts. Anyone that has a PERS pension is starting to see incremental increases, significant incremental increases in their expenditures.
Right. So what's the increase for Santa Maria this year?
We're gonna spend about $11.5 million in the general fund on pension-related expenses.
Right.
Put it in perspective, we have a $67 million general fund. That's about 15% of our entire budget in one line item,
Right.
pension. If you go back four years ago, it was around $7 million. And so each year, it's gone up on average over the last 4 years, about $1 million a year.
Right.
It's a $4 million increase. Next year, it's going up about another $1 million. The year after that, it's about $900,000. And those are what PERS is providing us, known costs.
For Santa Maria, those increases mean concrete, boots on the ground expenses lost, really, right?
What that means is if we can finance those increases, that means a lack of service.
Right.
That means, as you said, boots on the ground. You know, $1.5 million, you know, that's 13 police officers that we could have hired. You know, that's another fire station we could have staffed. And when you have that on a year-in, year-out basis over the last 3 or 4 years, I mean, that's a third of our police force that we could have out there patrolling the streets, that we don't because PERS had a bad return on their investment.
So what's Santa Maria to do?
I'm Logan B. Anderson, and for more stories about city government, check out SantaMariaTimes.com or
follow me on Twitter, @Logan B. Anderson.